What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I'm your host, EJ Holland. Tonight, we're going to be talking Tai Haywood and much more. I'll be answering all of your questions, so make sure to leave a comment with a question. But before you do, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. We are at 31,500 subscribers, so we want to get up to 32,000, our next goal. So help us out, subscribe to the YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos, and like this video, get us in front of other Michigan fans so we have more questions coming into the chat box. And if you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine.com, now is the time to go ahead and do that. We have a ton of recruiting information coming in following Tai Haywood's official visit over the weekend, a ton on 2026 recruiting. We have so much more on the team, basketball, transfer portal. Head over to the Wolverine.com for exclusive insider information on everything Michigan recruiting. $1 for 2 months. Use that promo code UM1. Again, that's $1 for 2 months over at the Wolverine.com. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into the questions. If you guys want to skip the line, go ahead and hit that box with the dollar symbol. That gives us a super chat so we can continue to travel around and see top recruits on Michigan's board. So again, hit that super chat button if you want to donate and skip the line. All right, let's start off with Tyson Smith. And he says, when is Haywood deciding? So 5-star offensive lineman Tai Haywood made his official visit to Michigan over the weekend. Everything went really well from what I was able to gather. I think this visit allowed Haywood to get a closer look at the program. He got a chance to hang out with some of the players on the team, including Bryce Underwood, who has been actively recruiting him. Obviously, he spent extended time with the staff, including Sherrone, offensive line coach Grant Newsome, new offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey. His mother joined him for the visit, so it was great for her to see the campus and the facilities and all that good stuff. So I think the visit was important. It had to happen since Haywood had never been to campus before. But I think the biggest factor in this recruitment is still NIL. And I think Sean McGee, Michigan's general manager, and those involved in Michigan's NIL negotiations have done a great job with Haywood. I think they've put together a really strong deal for him. I still don't think Texas Tech is doing what Michigan's doing. I don't think Florida State is either. I think right now Michigan has the best NIL offer on the table, and that's obviously giving the Wolverines a big advantage here. I've had my prediction in since November. I mean, Michigan's had these NIL discussions since then. Any recruitment that has the people that backed the Underwood recruitment, they've won. So I'm talking about Underwood, I'm talking about Justice Haynes out of the portal. I think this people around those NIL deals are also involved with Haywood. So I have had confidence since I put in that prediction around Thanksgiving. And I still have confidence. I still, am very optimistic about my prediction. And you've seen others join me in putting in predictions as well. Our On3 national analysts, Steve Wiltfong and Chad Simmons, also put in picks. So Michigan very much trending to land their third 5-star of the cycle. Obviously, Haywood would join Bryce Underwood and Andrew Babalola. In terms of when is Haywood deciding, I think that's been the big question. Look, I said the same thing with Justice Haynes when we were going through that whole ordeal. I think it's a matter of when, not if, and Michigan just has to check all the final boxes. And there's nothing else Michigan can do to win over Haywood. I think they're already there. I think they're about to break the ribbon on the finish line. So it's just kind of putting, those final touches, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, whatever cliches you want to say. It kind of took a little bit with Justice Haynes. It could take a little bit with Tai Haywood. It might not. They might expedite it. I think, National Signing Day is only about 2 weeks away. I'm not sure if we get all the way there, without Haywood making a decision. But, you know, the maximum it could take is 2 weeks, but I could easily see him deciding at some point this week. Again, I don't think he's planning to take any other visits at this point. I think Michigan did enough on the official visit. I think they've done enough on the NIL side. So full steam ahead for the Wolverines and Tai Haywood. All right, Tyson Smith back with another one. He says, is Zier Mathis still visiting this weekend? So yes, on 300 Edge, Zier Mathis, former Ohio State commit, is set to make his official visit to Michigan this weekend. He's already been to Florida State. He's been to UCLA. Michigan, you know, gets the next shot in this one. I think Lou Esposito has done a really nice job of recruiting Mathis, quickly building up a relationship with him. Esposito was recently in Philadelphia, seeing Mathis as well. He's a tall, athletic pass rusher, something that Michigan didn't really land this cycle. You know, they picked up a commitment from Julius Holly, but he's more of a compact edge. Nate Marshall, more of a tweener edge. So they didn't really have, you know, that tall, long guy. Mathis, 6'5.5", 230 pounds. He's pretty lean. We'll need to add some weight, but I mean, I love him off the edge. He's fast. He's athletic. The length is there. I mean, Michigan landed those types of guys last cycle. Lugert Adekpayi, Devin Baxter, Dom Nichols, they were all taller guys with length. Those are the types of edges that I personally prefer. So it's great to see Michigan involved with Mathis. I'm not sure, you know, if Michigan's going to win him over. I think Michigan's obviously in a really strong spot. I don't have enough intel to put in a prediction. And Maryland has also entered the mix and will receive his final visit next weekend. So January 31st. That's interesting. You know, Maryland has landed some elite edges. They actually hold a commitment from the number one edge in the 2025 recruiting class in Zion Ely. So Maryland's definitely a dark horse that I'm keeping an eye on. Florida State impressed on its visit. So this one's close. We'll see how the Michigan OV goes this coming weekend. Tyson Smith says, how happy were you when Notre Dame lost last night? I actually didn't even watch the game. I was grilling up some pork chops and doing other things. So I did keep some tabs on the scores. And obviously, you know, I sent out a couple of trolling tweets after the loss. So yeah, you know, I mean, I was pretty happy, I guess. I mean, like I said last week, I would prefer Notre Dame not to win a national championship because it's easy to make fun of them. I mean, they haven't won anything of significance in almost 40 years, which is wild. They are a very antiquated program and still a bunch of weirdos. All right. David says, is Michigan working on getting Mark Bowman to visit? I read he may reclassify to 2026. So for those of you that don't know, Mark Bowman is the number one tight end in the country, the number 5 overall prospect in the 2027 recruiting class. Michigan tight ends coach Steve Casula was at Mater Day seeing Bowman last week. Excuse me. So the interesting thing here about Bowman is he actually has the same recruiting coordinator as Mason Graham. And I had a chance to catch up with him about Casula visiting, and I'll have more on Bowman at the Wolverine. I'm not sure where he stands in terms of reclassifying, but I can tell you that Michigan is working hard here. Like I said, Casula was just at Mater Day visiting him. They would really love to get him on campus this offseason. So we'll see if if that happens. I think if he reclasses to 26, obviously Michigan will have to expedite his recruitment. If he stays in 2027, they have some time to continue building up that relationship, but the Wolverines certainly trying to become a factor for Mark Bowman. Ben Ricketts says, who is your best guess on the next 26 commitment? It's tough because it's so early. It's only January. I mean, if I had to give a guess, I would just go with a local guy. I would go with CJ Sadler. I think Michigan is the heavy leader for Sadler early on. He's close to home. He's a top priority on the board. He's very close to Bryce Underwood. They grew up together in the Sound Mind, Sound Body program. Sound Mind, Sound Body does a great job of training, mentoring, doing travel 7-on-7. And like I said, Underwood and Sadler were both a part of that. I know Underwood has actively been recruiting CJ, so that certainly helps. I know Sadler would love to play with Bryce, and even talking to Curtis Blackwell, who's the founder of Sound Mind, Sound Body, and just a big, recruiting figurehead in the Detroit Metro. I mean, he was straight up with me and was like, look, CJ would love to play with Bryce. That gives Michigan an advantage in this recruitment. So I have a pick in for CJ. I could, see him jumping on board early and potentially helping lead the class, which would be big. He's not the tallest of guys. He's, a smaller guy, 5'9", 170, but he's electric with the ball in his hands. You can do so much with him. You can line him up in the slot on the outside. He can return kicks and punts. He can even play corner as well. There's a lot to like about CJ Sadler. I think he kind of reminds me a bit of Tavon Austin. Avadetabanaj says, do you know who's coming for junior day? Michigan doesn't do like traditional junior days. What's interesting about Michigan is they kind of spread out their visits in the winter and the spring, where they get smaller groups of kids on campus. So like this past weekend, for example, was a junior day, and there was only like 4 or 5 underclassmen on campus. You had Victor Singleton, Bear McWhorter, a couple 2027s. Obviously Tai Haywood was on his OV. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't, that big weekend. I'm not sure that Michigan does, huge weekends like other schools. When I was covering Texas, they had actual junior days where they had like 50 kids on campus, and Michigan never quite does that. Which kind of plays to their advantage. Like Victor Singleton told me after the visit this weekend, something I really enjoyed about going up to Michigan was the fact that I got all the attention, right? Like I got individualized attention. I got to sit next to Sherrone Moore at the basketball game. I had my meeting with Lamar Morgan. And so I think having the smaller weekends helps. So no real early names. I know Greg Patrick told me he was going to try to get up to Michigan either this weekend or next weekend. I'm sure you'll see more local talent, but Michigan usually gets the heavy hitters in the spring when they can see practice and all that good stuff. And obviously the staff has been hitting the road hard and visiting a lot of these guys in person as well. Avadetabanaj says, anything on Tristan Keys? Nothing new. I mean, Michigan's definitely pushing there. They're trying to get him on campus this offseason. Keys has expressed some interest. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about a 5-star, number 7 overall recruit in the country, NIL is going to have to be a major part. So I'm interested to see how much McGee, Michigan's general manager, Sean McGee, gets involved in this recruitment. So yeah, nothing really new to report with Keys. I mean, they'll keep on trying there for sure. Brandon Stanley says, go blue. Jackson Ross says, is CJ Sadler wanting to play both ways, something Michigan supports? I mean, I'm sure they would. I mean, from my past conversations with CJ, he prefers the offensive side of the ball anyway, which is where they like him. I'm sure CJ would be willing to play some corner, and Michigan would, let him get some work there if he really wanted to do it. But I think CJ prefers to be on the offensive side of the ball, unless that's changed recently. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely capable of doing so many different things. Like I said, I mean, you can put him in the slot on the outside. You can use him in the return game. He's a really good corner as well. So, I don't think Michigan would mind, letting him experiment all over the field. Brandon Stanley says, is Bryce Underwood the day one starter? And not necessarily. I mean, Michigan brought in Mikey Keene for a reason. I mean, Bryce obviously is a tremendous talent, being the number 1 quarterback in the country, the number 1 overall player in the country. So he's certainly capable of coming in and being that day one starter. I'm not saying he's not, but again, they brought in Mikey Keene. I think they might ease Bryce in a little bit, maybe like when JJ was a freshman. Obviously, JJ was extremely talented, was tough to keep off the field. It'll be the same for Bryce. Mikey is a guy that knows Chip Lindsey's offense inside and out. He's been in it before. He has a great relationship with Lindsey. He has a lot of experience. The cool thing about talking to Mikey Keene, which if you missed my interview with Mikey Keene and you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine.com, go subscribe and read the Mikey Keene interview. It's really, really great. He says a lot of awesome stuff and talks about, embracing the role of mentor for Bryce. So I think Mikey will be, a good role model for Bryce, a guy that can offer a lot of different insights on commanding the Lindsey offense, how to work with Lindsey, just his overall experience facing different collegiate defenses. So, Mikey had a lot of great things to say about coming in and joining the quarterback room with Bryce. So I think you'll probably see Mikey first before you see Bryce, but you never know. Bryce might be too good and he'll just win the battle. We do have a super chat coming in from Thamabone30, and he says, what top 100 defensive tackles are Michigan looking at? Also excited for Captain America, Brave New World. I have never seen a Captain America movie, so I can't really, I'm not really big into superheroes. So I can't express the same excitement, but glad you're excited. As far as defensive linemen or defensive tackles in particular, some guys that they've had on campus, they're defensive tackles tough because if you're talking about like nose guys, they usually develop a little later in the process. So if you remember Kenneth Grant, I don't believe Michigan offered him until around this time during his recruitment. And then he didn't even really get a true rankings bump until way later. So it's really tough to, project nose guys this early in the process, even though it's kind of late, like we're already in the 26 cycle. I feel like nose prospects come along the latest out of any position groups. But in terms of, just noses and three techs, some guys they've already had on campus are Aiden Harris. He's the number 1 defensive lineman in the country, I believe, out of North Carolina. I think he's an Ohio State lean early on, but Michigan has had him in Ann Arbor. Jermaine Kinsler is a guy I really like. I saw him play this season for Bergen Catholic. He was on campus for the game against Texas. Esposito is a New Jersey native, so that could potentially help. In terms of others, pull up this. Elijah Golden out of Sarasota, Florida, is a guy that named Michigan in his top group. He hasn't been to campus yet. James Johnson out of Florida is another guy. Lou Esposito saw him on the road this week. With defensive linemen, I think there just haven't been a ton of visitors. And I think also another thing that's important to note there is Lou Esposito was the latest hire last year. So he had to focus so much on 2025 that I think he's a little still kind of playing catch up on 2026. But those are probably some names to know. Damari Simeon out of New Jersey is another one. He's a top 100 guy. Esposito visited him, I want to say a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. So, he's certainly high on the board as well. John A. Schultz says, EJ, what does the top of the wide receiver board look like, and where does Michigan stand with their top targets? Tristan Keys is obviously at the top. We talked about him here just a few questions ago. Michigan definitely trying to get in the mix with him. He would be kind of that elite game changer if you're going to spend NIL on a wide receiver. He would be the guy. Aside from Tristan Keys, they really like Travis Johnson. Obviously, Sherrone Moore, Chip Lindsey, and others were here in my own backyard. Seeing Travis Johnson this morning, he's another big-bodied wide receiver. Michigan obviously made it a point to add size in 2025. Johnson could continue that trend in 26, 6'3", 180. You know, Bryce Underwood needs guys to throw to. So Keys and Johnson would be the two big ones to know. You know, aside from Keys and Johnson, I think most of you guys are already familiar with those two. They like prospects like Jabari Mack. He's a top 100 guy out of Louisiana, but he'll be a tough pool. Jalen Lott out of Texas, but, you know, he'll be a tough pool as well. CJ Sadler, I already mentioned. I think Michigan's in a great spot there. They already hold a commitment from Jalen Pyle. You know, some other names to know: Nolan Scott out of Georgia, Messiah Hampton out of Rochester, Mason James out of Oklahoma. All those guys have visited Michigan. Another Virginia wide receiver that Michigan's showing more and more interest in is Davion Brown. He's another kind of big-bodied guy, interesting build. So, yeah, those are kind of the wide receivers on the board right now. Ryland31 says, what transfers are still available that Michigan is recruiting and may win over, position groups that still need to be addressed? You know, the portal window is closing, basically. There aren't a lot of guys left out there. I think the glaring needs that Michigan still has are dynamic wide receiver and a offensive tackle. Obviously, you saw Shiaz Pete fly off the board this weekend. They never really got movement with Daniel King, who was transferring from Troy and committed to North Carolina. So, you know, they've explored some other options. Leaf Magnuson, an Arizona transfer, is a kid that they've still been, you know, kind of monitoring, but he projects maybe more as a guard. They might have to wait to the spring and just kind of see how that plays out. Obviously, the whole Skylar Bell situation at wide receiver set them back a little bit. If you remember, I put in a prediction for Skylar Bell. It seemed like a done deal, and then he ran into some issues with credit. So he's a guy they might have to circle back to in the spring. But, you know, at this point, they're just it's kind of slim pickings right now. Let's go to Fancy Lion. And he says, give us your percent confidence on Tai Haywood. Well, I would say 90% is my confidence on Tai Haywood. John A. Schultz says, EJ, hypothetical. You are put in charge of Michigan's NIL budget for high school recruiting in 26. Where do you spend it, and which players do you spend it on? That's a good question. I definitely would spend it on wide receivers. I know, you know, Michigan is going to be run first under Sherrone Moore, even though Chip Lindsey is expected to bring a more balanced attack. But look, you just invested millions of dollars in Bryce Underwood. You have to get him some talented weapons. And, you know, if it were me, I would spend it on Tristan Keys, Travis Johnson, CJ Sadler, you know, with Tristan and Travis being my outside guys, CJ being my inside guy. And then maybe just, I don't know. I'd have to go down. I'd literally just spend it on somebody that runs below a 10.8, 100 meter. I don't know who's out there. I'd have to go look at track times with Michigan's wide receiver room needs to get faster. You have too much of the same type of guy. And, you know, obviously Travis would be another big body, which is great. But and Tristan Keys, you know, would be that elite playmaker. But I want a true burner, like a game-changing speed type burner. Michigan hasn't landed that since Xavier Worthy, and he didn't even make it to the field. So, yeah, I mean, I would have to look at that, but definitely somebody that's just elite, blazing speed. I think you've done enough with the offensive line. If you get Tai Haywood and Andrew Babalola this cycle, I don't think there's any reason to overspend for Jackson Cantwell, who's the number one player in the country. I think I would spend it on defensive line. As I said, defensive line guys usually emerge a little later, but I mean, full speed ahead with defensive line. I mean, I would go with an elite edge guy like Jake Krull would be my guy at edge. I love him. You know, and then I would also pair him with a longer. Jake Krull is more of a compact edge, so I would pair him with a Carter Meadows type, a taller, longer kid out of Gonzaga. As far as actual defensive linemen, I really like Ernest Rankins out of Georgia. They recently offered him. Jermaine Kinsler, who I mentioned earlier, I would definitely go after. Damari Simeon is another I would go after. So, defensive line, wide receivers, I think are the positions that I would definitely target. Fancy Lion says, how many spots will Haywood move us in the ranks? So right now, Michigan has the number 9 recruiting class. I believe that if Tai Haywood commits the way things stand today, Michigan would move up to number 6. All right, right now is a good time to just take a quick break. Remind you guys to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have more than 180 people watching right now, so we should have 180 likes. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos. And also subscribe to the Wolverine.com today. If you haven't used the promo code UM1, that's $1 for 2 months for even more insider Michigan recruiting information. All right, let's get back to the questions. We only have about 5 minutes left. So if you want to skip the line and avoid just getting a short answer for rapid fire, hit that little box with the dollar symbol. That money goes directly to my travel budget. You can use a super chat and jump the line. John A. Schultz says, EJ has a non-completed his secret mission yet. I think that's more of an inside joke on the Wolverine, but he has not completed the mission. Zachary Pizzo says, I saw coaches were in VA today. Did they see Haider? They were supposed to see him this afternoon. I'm waiting to hear back from his dad to see how that went. But yeah, I mean, Savon Haider, the number 1 running back in the country. He's a top target. General manager Sean McGee was traveling in Virginia with Sherrone Moore. They've already had positive NIL discussions with Savon. I still think Michigan is the leader here. So, I'm curious to see how things went tonight. So I should have an update over at the Wolverine soon. Troy Radcliffe says, when is the last time we had 3 5-stars? I'm really not sure. Not in my time covering Michigan recruiting, so I don't know. I would think it would be like sometime early in the Harbaugh era, maybe when they landed like Jabril Peppers and Rashawn Gary. I don't know. I'd need a Michigan historian to look that up. Eric Badinger says, anything on Leaf Magnuson or any other transfer portal offensive line targets? They're still monitoring Magnuson. We haven't heard any real significant movement there. I think they need a tackle, and Leaf is a little bit more of a guard. So, like I said, slim pickings. It's late in the portal window. They might have to wait until the spring. John A. Schultz says, EJ, if Shamari is ranked number 32 in On3's rankings, why isn't he a 5-star? Will he stay number 32 in the final rankings? So the reason that Shamari Earls is not a 5-star, and sorry, we have Savion's profile still pulled up, but Shamari Earls, he's number 32 right now, but they're doing a final rankings update. I want to say the week of signing day, which would be the first week in February. And they don't dish out 5 stars to all 32 players until that week. So if Shamari stays at 32, he'll be a 5-star. If he doesn't stay at 32, then obviously he won't. The bad thing about Shamari is that he was injured and missed all of his senior season. So I don't know. I think it's going to be tough for him to stay there, but we'll see. I mean, obviously I have him graded as a 5-star. I don't really care that he missed his senior season. The injury wasn't that significant. He's already practicing with the team. So yeah, we'll see. They do those final rankings the first week of February. So, that's when we'll obviously find out. Fancy Lion says, I heard McKinney is recommitting to Michigan. This will be huge. Keegan Imhoff said, did On3 paywall the industry comparison? I don't think so. Did they? I mean, I'm logged in on my account, so I can't tell you if they did or didn't because it would obviously show me. but I don't think they did paywall the industry comparison. I'll have to ask about that. John A. Schultz says, EJ, since Malachi Lee is not going on a mission, does that move him up the offensive tackle board in 26? Seems like a better target than Cantwell, given the NIL factor. Yeah, Malachi Lee's definitely at the top of the tackle board. He was the first recruit that Grant Newsome went out on the road and saw. He's a massive prospect, 6'7", 310 pounds. So, like I said, when you asked me the recruiting budget question, I said, I'm not sure I would go all in on Cantwell, which was actually a topic I wrote about at the Wolverine earlier this week. I'm not sure I would go all in on Cantwell with NIL, given that you're doing that with Tai Haywood and you're probably going to land him and you got Babalola. I think a guy like Malachi Lee is a perfect addition at tackle. And like you said, he's not going on a 2-year mission. They like some other guys as well. They're going to shoot their shot for John Turntine, who's an elite level tackle, maybe a little bit more like Haywood in terms of starting inside out, being a guard. They like Felix Ojo, who's an odd 300 guy out of Texas. They recently offered Max Wright out of Texas. They like Thomas Wilder out of Virginia. So there's definitely some other offensive tackle options as well. Jackson Ross says, CJ Sadler tweeted today that he wants to play both ways. Okay, I didn't see CJ's tweet, but I still think his preference would, if he had to pick one, I still think he'd pick offense. But yeah, I'm sure Michigan would let him try whatever. I mean, he's good at corner too. I'm not saying he can't play corner, like he can. He's a little bit on the shorter side for corner, but he's such a great football player, man. I love CJ so much. Let's go down to John A. Scholt, and he says, EJ, is Cade McNamara the day one starter for East Tennessee State? I'm not sure. I'm assuming that he would be. But yeah, let's go to Vijay, and he says, any chance Jazil Hart can play wide receiver and corner for us? Yeah, Jazil's another one that could go both ways. I saw Jazil this fall, and I like him more as a corner. But he can play wide receiver. I mean, he made a bunch of plays. There's highlights of Jazil here on the YouTube channel. If you just search Jazil Hart, the Wolverine, you'll see game clips of my time seeing him. I like him at corner because he just looks so polished there. His footwork's great. I mean, he does a fantastic job, and man, has pretty good length as well. But I mean, he made a ton of plays at wide receiver, so he can certainly do it. Enlay Wu says, do we have a shot at Key? I think he meant Tristan Keys. And yeah, I mean, I think Michigan is in there, but they'll probably have to ramp up NIL. Sean248 says, who are some of your personal favorite top 100 to 300 prospects? Okay, so guys ranked between 100 and 300. I really like at quarterback. I know we've been talking about Ryder Lyons a lot. I really like Oscar Rios. I think Oscar Rios is the perfect guy to come in behind Bryce Underwood. So Chip Lindsey was out in California seeing several quarterbacks, including Ryder Lyons, but he also stopped by to see Rios. As you see, he's ranked number 247 overall, so he qualifies. He has good height at 6'3". He's a little lean. I mean, he is skinny at 170, but he'll have to add some weight. But he has the frame to carry it. I think he'll add another 25, 30 pounds. But if you look at his highlights, his junior tape or his junior reel, which are just the little huddle clips, it shows more of his passing, which is great because you get to see the improvement from sophomore to junior year. But if you look at the sophomore tape, you can see how great he is as a runner. He's explosive, really dynamic. And then the junior tape showcases his ability in and around the pocket, very elusive, has great escapability, has a really good arm as well. There's certainly some arm talent there. There's just a lot to work with Oscar Rios. My personal preference is guys at the quarterback position that can run. I think in today's college football, you have to have a guy that's also a threat with his legs, and Oscar Rios can run. So I think he's a little bit more of a developmental guy, but I think that's the kind of guy you need after Bryce. I think, Rios is a guy he comes in, you redshirt him, he learns from Bryce, he has another year of development. And then Bryce is gone after 3 years. If Bryce, it pans out the way we expect him to pan out. And then you have Oscar Rios who's ready to go. But I like him. I also like his demeanor, his attitude. I've never met him in person, but just talking with him on the phone the other day, I mean, really relatable kid, seems to have a really good work ethic. I spoke to his trainer earlier in the week. He had a lot of great things to say about Oscar as well. In fact, his trainer, Danny Hernandez out in California, he works with Oscar, he works with Brady Smeagol, and he works with Ryder Lyons. So I asked him about Ryder, asked him about Brady, and both of those guys are higher ranked than Oscar. But the guy he talked about the most was Oscar. There's something about Oscar that I think is really fascinating. So he's a guy that I really like. I know I went on a long tangent about Oscar, but I really, really like him. Some other guys I like in that range, Travis Johnson, he's a top wide receiver target for a reason. We talked about him earlier. I've seen him many times here. He lives 20 minutes away. So, he's another big body that I think can be a difference maker. At tight end, I really like Matt Ludwig out of Montana. He's, a top tight end target for the Wolverines. Steve Casula recently went out there to see him. Michigan's obviously had success recruiting a tight end out of an obscure area with Colston Loveland. So I think Matt Ludwig could be that next guy. I focus really heavily on offense. Let me just give a defensive guy really quick. I'm just going to scroll through my little cheat sheet here. Let's see. Let's go with Andre Clark. We don't talk a lot about Andre Clark. He's a Virginia guy out of Richmond. He's pretty high on the corner board, quiet, doesn't talk a lot at all. And he quietly has Michigan in his top group. He visited in the summer. He told me he's planning to get back this offseason, wasn't able to make it to a game. He's listed at safety, but Michigan likes him as a corner. I like him as a corner too. But he's definitely one to keep an eye on that we just haven't talked a whole lot about. He's ranked as the number 173 prospect in the country. But, we talk so much about Brody Jennings and Jazil Hart and the Ohio corners, but Andre Clark is a prospect that Michigan really likes too. We've gone over time, guys, so let's go rapid fire. Elric says, I would like superb route running. Oh, this is not even a question, but Elric does say who has it better than us? Nobody. So Enlay Wu says, what position do you feel you have the best evaluation for? That's a good question. I mean, my favorite positions to evaluate are D-line, which I feel like I've had really good evaluations. Obviously I was higher than the services on Mason Graham. I was higher on the services than the services on Kenneth Grant, TJ Guy. I mean, I feel like I've had a pretty good hit rate of defensive line guys, and I haven't really missed on anybody there either. I really like evaluating DBs. I think I've had some good ones there. Not that Will Johnson was very hard to evaluate, but I was on Will when he was like an 8th grader before I was even on the Michigan beat. I was on Jair before he even had a ranking. I love Brandon Hillman when Michigan got in the mix with him. I was very high on Zeke Berry. So yeah, I mean, those are probably my two favorite positions to evaluate. Probably the ones that I would feel the most comfortable with. I think the hardest ones for me, I think, receiver seems like such an easier position to evaluate. And it is, if you look at a lot of metrics, but I don't know, man, some guys it's just like boom or bust sometimes. I've had some good evals there, but I've also feel like I've missed some there. And then offensive line is just kind of hard to project sometimes if you're not like an elite guy. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my opinion on it. Enlay Wu says, who's the most dominant? That was a bad misspelling. Who's the most dominant defensive line, offensive line prospect that you've ever seen in your reporting career? My favorite offensive line prospect was probably J.C. Latham. I saw him early on too, and I think some schools liked him as a D lineman early, but I always liked him as an offensive lineman. And he was, I think JC was super high in the draft. Greg Little from back in the day was a former 5-star out of Texas. Those are guys that come to mind. Kenny G, obviously. Kenneth Grant's my favorite defensive line prospect ever. I also liked him as a kid, so I was partial to him. And, obviously, like I said, I was super high on Mason too. Eric Budinger says, heard Nate Marshall move to a 5-star on Rivals. Will he move to a 5-star on 3? Probably not. I think on 3 is the lowest on Nate Marshall of all the services. Are they not? No, they're not. Okay, 24/7 is the lowest on Nate Marshall of the services. But I don't know. I don't know how much he'll move up from 94. That's a huge jump going from 94 to 32. I haven't been a Nate Marshall truther for basically the entire cycle, and I still have a little bit of question marks with his frame, but he was great in the All-Star game. I was really impressed with him. So, I think he could rise his stock. I just don't think that, or raise his stock. I just am not sure he can make that quite of a significant jump to be a 5-star. Keegan Imhoff says, what is wrong with the Notre Dame Leprechaun's head? I don't know. I've never paid attention to his head. Doesn't he wear a hat? More questions about the Leprechauns. I really don't know. I'd have to go look at him. Our last question is Eric George. He says, what are the odds of Michigan landing Zier Mathis before his visit this weekend with Maryland emerging as a new school? I don't think Michigan will land him before the visit. He's never been to campus, so they have to get him on campus. And then, I'm not sure we'll even see a decision from him until signing day. So it's definitely a close race. Really curious to see how the official visit goes. And so for more on Zier's visit going into the weekend, more on Tai Haywood and others, head over to thewolverine.com. Subscribe today. Use that promo code UM1. It's $1 for 2 months at thewolverine.com. And also like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, and I will see you guys next week.